When I got the music from Quincy, I had to smile and say, he played it right into this preacher's hand. I love to tell the story. What an absolutely lovely summary of what we believe and say about Jesus. Perfect for the gospel today. Come to me, all you who are weary, and take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and humble of heart. You will find rest for your souls. You can almost hear that song rising from that feeling of rest and the love of Jesus. Except perhaps we might have to ignore that conflict right at the beginning of that gospel where Jesus goes after those folks that aren't willing to accept his easy yoke. That's the problem with summaries, right? Even good ones. You kind of have to leave out some of the details. And maybe the ones that don't fit so easily with the song that we love to sing. For example, Trinity has been telling a certain story since Pentecost. We've been reading over several Sundays the stories of our ancestors in faith, beginning with the promise to Abraham and Sarah of a child. It's a great summary. Abraham and Sarah are really old, they don't have any children yet. God comes to them and says, guess what? Even at this late moment, I will provide for you a son, and he will be the ancestor of many nations. And Isaac is born, and God fulfills that promise. A great summary of the beginning of our Christian faith that we share with our Jewish neighbors. Except there's more to the story. Because right after Isaac was born, Sarah, our ancestor in faith, basically ordered her husband to send away her servant Hagar, who also had a son named Ishmael, who was Abraham's son. And Sarah didn't want that son to inherit anything with her son Isaac, so she told Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael out into the wilderness as if to die. Might have. Last week we heard the story of how Abraham thought that God wanted him, or God told him to sacrifice his son Isaac. Don't worry. Both the sons and Hagar survived okay. But even more, we have this lovely story today that's almost a love match when you read the whole thing. In an arranged marriage of Rebekah and Isaac coming together and loving each other. So sweet. Except the story ends when Rebekah and her favorite son Isaac conspire to trick Isaac and his favorite son Esau so that Jacob gets the inheritance and Esau gets nothing. It's quite a family story, isn't it? Worthy of a miniseries or a reality TV show like the Ancient Patriarchs of Palestine or something. But if we thought about it for a minute in our own family stories, isn't there sometimes a difference between the summary that goes out in the Christmas letter and what might have actually unfolded? Do you ever think it's helpful maybe to tell a little bit more of the truth sometimes, even if it's hard? I wonder what gets in our way sometimes of telling the whole story when we need to. I imagine guilt or shame or regret might factor in there. There's probably others too. How might we learn to tell the fuller story when we need to, when it's important? I've been thinking about that over this holiday weekend as we celebrated the 250th anniversary of the events that led to the founding of our country. And lots of conversations about the kind of story that we tell, and of course on Independence Days we want to give the best summary possible. Perhaps we might all sing the secular analog of I Love to Tell the Story, God Bless America. And lots of people sang it this weekend. And of course it's true, as far as it goes. Then again, sometimes as we tell that story, even at national holidays, we leave out some of the details that are also part of what makes us a nation, even if we won't want to admit it. This past 6 months or so, I've been participating in a curriculum with other clergy called Sacred Ground. And you can imagine that it covers a lot of those details, especially how our understandings of race and racism have shaped our nation. It also has been very sobering to learn that, of course, our Christian faith has always been tied up with how we talked about our nation. That sometimes our faith was deployed, for example, to justify the displacement of Native peoples and the erasure of their culture. That our Christian faith was sometimes used to justify the enslavement of people. There was an Episcopal bishop, by the way, that wrote that tract. We also, though, tell the story in the summary of the resilience of people who were oppressed, of how they rose up, of how they showed us a new way. That one often makes the summary. Some of what comes before doesn't always. Trinity just buried a man named Ken Mines a couple of months ago, who was part of that story, the story of resilience, the story of telling the whole truth. A man who spent his entire life trying to bring about those best things that we like to summarize on July the 4th, about freedom and liberty and justice for all. He started that by being the first black officer to integrate Fort Benning, Georgia, though he still had to sit behind all the white officers on the bus. But never in his life did he stop believing the story we tell ourselves as citizens of this country, and believing the story we tell ourselves here about who we really are in the sight of God. For his entire life, he could tell the whole story. And he never let grief or regret or anger or shame get in the way. I think the folks here at Trinity would agree if I say he helped us learn to tell a truer, more faithful story. We're grateful to him for it. It's his witness and the witness of others that suggests to me some ways that we as Christians, as citizens of this country, might find a way to tell a truer, more faithful story, even a story we might still love to tell. I wonder if it starts by all of us just learning all the details of the story. You know, as Reformation Christians, I think we can agree that our collection of scriptures is pretty good at telling the whole story. It doesn't wash out any of the bad stuff. It tells the whole story of how people are faithful and aren't faithful, how they win, how they're defeated, how they love and how they fail to love. I bet we could all devote ourselves more strongly to reading that story and learning even the story that unfolds after that. I wonder, too, if we might learn to tell our story more faithfully, if we sought out and listened to the stories of those who have been left out of the summary because they were not favored, because they were oppressed, because they were victims of injustice. Let's be honest, some of us may have some of those stories ourselves because of our gender, our sexual orientation, our perceived impairment. There's lots of ways the whole story gets edited out. Might it be like to privilege those stories and those storytellers so that both their stories and their resilience become a part of that truer and faithful story that we tell? I wonder if learning to tell a story like that, to learn to love telling it, even if it's hard, might help draw us just beyond those things that get in our way. The guilt, the grief, the shame, the regret. Maybe telling that story will lead us just a little bit more towards something like reconciliation, like gestures toward justice that makes right what was wrong, that offers not only to us but to all of our neighbors this rest and refreshment that comes with accepting Jesus' gentle yoke. I don't think that would be easy necessarily, but it has been done before. What would it be like to take on that task ourselves, to become truer, more faithful storytellers of our whole story, both of faith, of our country, to train ourselves to love to tell the whole story. Might we discover together that we do indeed love to tell it, and even more, as we try, we may come to love living it as well.